Hello and welcome to my virtual session on diversity and inclusion, a multi-systemic approach. Before I start, I'd like to respectfully acknowledge the original custodians of the land in which we meet today and those who are joining us across the continent at the conference. On the land in which I meet you today, the traditional owners are the Bunurong people, and I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and may the children of today lead us to a brighter tomorrow. Lovely to meet you all. I am Kylie Williams. I'm a psychologist and clinical supervisor for the multi-systemic therapy team at Ozchild in Victoria, Australia. The team was formed in 2019. It was the first MST standard team in Victoria. And the program was funded to address the diverse and complex needs of families with a young person who is involved in the youth justice system. So why a multi-systemic approach? So in order to understand the unique needs of a young person involved in the youth justice system, we first need to understand their ecology. And according to the social ecological theory of Uri Bronfenbrenner, young people live in an ecology of interconnected systems. And these systems include family, peers, school, neighbourhood, community and culture. And these systems impact behaviours both directly and indirectly, and reciprocal and bidirectional in nature. And we know that youth behaviour can be strongly influenced both positively and negatively by their ecology. Therefore, these same systems can also influence change when included in addressing antisocial behaviours. So how do we understand a young person across systems? So to fully assess the diverse needs of a young person, we need to first understand their ecology, starting with the young person. Their identity, who do they identify as and how would they like to be referred? And this can include things like gender and cultural connection. What's the young person's goals? What are their identified strengths? What are needs and what are struggles? And also any physical or mental health considerations. Moving across to their family, who are considered family? Blood and non-blood related members, role models, community elders, who is important to this young person? And their position within the family system. Are they seen as an adult? Are they connected to their family? Do they feel that they have strong relationships with family? Peers, who are considered friends? Close friends versus associates? Their peer groups, are they positive or negative influences? And the position and function within a peer group, are they seen as a leader, a follower? And what are their ties within that negative peer group? School and work. What's their educational background? So the strengths and struggles, goals for school or work. What does the young person want? Do they want to train to get employment? Or do they want to stay at school? And is the current setting really meeting their needs? Neighbourhood, geographical strengths and needs of the area they live in. And this could include things like accessibility and availability of pro-social activities like drop-in centres, recreational facilities, transport, services and safety. And community and culture, cultural background, and do they have any connection to culture? Needs and barriers and strengths within that cultural group. So what role do systems play? So how can these systems play a role in offending A multi-systemic approach incorporates each of these systems and allows us to gather a broader picture of a young person's world and their experiences within it. And by doing so, it fosters both diversity and inclusion. Gaining a deeper understanding of the young person's ecology provides the opportunity to better harness the strengths already existing within systems and target supports to the areas experiencing challenges. And while this diagram is not an exhaustive list, it gives you some insight in how systems can play a role in a young person perhaps engaging in criminal activity. The young person may not be engaged in or struggling in education. The family may be struggling with how to respond to behaviours of concern, and that may include things like absconding from the home, family conflict, violence, aggression. There may be a negative peer association, and the young person is spending time with peers who they are also offending with. There may be unmet needs, poverty, housing, an absence of pro-social friends and activities within the community. And there also may be some mental health and substance misuse concerns. So if we apply this multi-systemic approach to a case example, and this young person's name is DK, they're 14, a male of African Australian background who lives at home with his mum and his 6 siblings. And he's been expelled from 2 schools, currently not engaged in school, and has now been absent from education for almost a year. His mum identifies it's difficult to keep DK at home as he prefers to be out with friends. Sometimes he doesn't come home for days. She's worried that if she tries to physically stop him from leaving, she will get in trouble with authorities. And DK is getting into trouble with police. He's stolen items such as phones and cars in the company of his peers. He recently received a custodial sentence and spent 6 weeks in remand. And DK now has a youth justice order with conditions. So in order to understand DK's diverse needs, we need to understand the strengths and needs, starting with DK. So things like, what are DK's individual strengths and struggles? What are his goals, short and long term? And what's his interpersonal connections? Who's important in DK's world? For family, it may be supports. What supports are available, formal and informal, to mum? Does mum have extended family that she can lean on or get support from? Does DK also have extended family he can get support from? And what are the parental or caregiver or the family concerns that they have? And what is the family history that we need to be mindful of, or any risks associated with that? For school or work, it may be, what are the barriers to DK attending school or gaining employment? What are his academic needs? And also, what are the goals towards educational work? If we look at peers, it may be about understanding, who does DK spend time with? What peers increase and what peers decrease antisocial behaviour? Is there peers in his ecology that perhaps are pro-social that DK could spend time with? And what's the function, position and risks associated with the peer group he's mixing with? In the neighbourhood, it may be around neighbourhood safety. Does the family feel safe? And what is available to DK and the family within the neighbourhood, whether it be recreational parks, youth groups, services, public transport, accessibility. And culture and community. What is DK's connection to culture? Does he connect to his African background? And is there any availability of mentors within the community? that could reach out? And how are they perceived by others within and outside community and culture? So the key sort of benefits of this multi-systemic approach is it allows really for the comprehensive information gathering and gains multiple perspectives on the diverse needs, strengths, and challenges of young people and their families. By doing so, it also supports the empowerment of caregivers to be the agent of change in responding to the systemic needs of the young person, because we upskill caregivers to sustain change and decrease, therefore, a need for formal services in the future. And it allows for robust identification of key drivers contributing to a young person's behaviour, and addressing those needs. It also promotes the collaboration across the systems to avoid silos, over-servicing, information gaps, and targets more appropriate supports. So what we have learned along the way. So over the last financial year, 85% of our families receiving MST were from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds. And what we have learned is that families across cultural groups have varied challenges unique to their family and not necessarily unique to the culture. We never assume, we always come with a curious mind, and we've learnt so much from our families. We've been invited and welcomed into their homes. We've been included in family celebrations. And it's one of probably the most amazing experiences the clinicians in the team have had, is learning so much about different cultures and families that we will always keep in mind. We also understand that there needs to be ongoing cultural training to meet the needs of families in a culturally safe and appropriate way. We're always learning. So what have some of our families told us at the end of treatment? Things like, you've listened to me, you've made me feel like I wasn't alone. I used to worry all the time, but now we're on the right track. There is hope now. I really liked how you got to know our family and gave us strategies to help the problems with our son. And that one in particular is quite a common response we get from our families, is that we got to know them on their terms and to really sort of understand what's going on for their family and what supports they need, rather than a one-size-fits-all type thinking. And then the last one, it's so hard to parent because before, services excluded us in the decision-making and treated our son like he was the adult. MST understood our role as the parent and helped give us the power to make changes for our family. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my presentation. You can reach out to me via the email if you would like any further information. Thank you.
Talofa lava, tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome to our presentation. My name is Tamasailau Suaali-Sauni, and together with my colleagues, Robert Webb, Talia, Wright-Bardohl, and Juan Todi, this is our presentation. Juan unfortunately isn't able to join us today, but he sends his aroha alofas to everyone. So our presentation is about building upon understandings of Māori and Samoan experiences of youth justice. It's a pleasure to be able to talk about our research project and some of the findings from that project that we've been able to collate to date. Before we start, I just want to point out that we're going to have a bit of a talanoa kōrero approach to this presentation, which means because Rob is organising the movement of slides, we're going to be talking to and fro, and with Talia, who will feed in as is appropriate. So in true Pacifica Māori style, we're going to kind of tag team as we go through this presentation. So basically, want to give some acknowledgements, provide you with some project background information, the aims and objectives of our project, the official statistics and some preliminary findings, issues arising from that in relation to our hui whono, and then some points for discussion. So there have been quite a few people that have contributed to be for this project to be able to get to where it is today. In particular, we send out a big whakatei ngā mihi nui to our project whono hui participants in the sites that we've been able to cover in our international study on Māori and Pacific experiences of youth justice. Or juvenile justice covers 3 countries, Aotearoa, New Zealand, Australia and California. And we were able to meet with quite a few of our peoples in these different places, and a big shout out and thank you to all of you for the commitment that you've given to support our project. Obviously the project wouldn't be able to get going without some funding support. So this is a project that's was funded by the Marsden Fund, Royal Society of New Zealand. And so we're really grateful for the opportunity to do this. Okay, so lastly, just in terms of acknowledgements, we have a much bigger team, research project team, to which we acknowledge as well. Thanks, Rob.
Looking at the project aims and objectives. So this is an international project, and we wanted to look at the ways in which our communities experienced youth justice. So we looked at several different areas, and the main countries are New Zealand, Aotearoa, Australia, and that's looking at Queensland and mainly the Brisbane and Gold Coast area, and also California and the USA for Samoan communities. So we're really interested in the ways in which our communities experience youth justice. And one of the reasons for comparing, I think, Māori and Samoan communities is often we experience some of the similar experience, I guess, community experiences of the justice system. So it's trying to value those understandings as we go through, and to look at how we experience and understand our knowledge of the system itself. So in this respect, we're taking a kaupapa Māori and a talanoa methodologies. We're combining those with qualitative methodologies. This is to help us understand the experiences and the stories of our communities as they navigate the youth justice system. We initially started the project in 2017. We got underway and we did a lot of consultation. We visited the different sites and consulted, and we've been collecting data over a period of years. In 2020, we had a bit of a halt to our data collection because COVID came around. So we didn't quite finish all the data collection, and we're just navigating at the moment how to go through the final bits of data collection post lockdown. So currently we're in lockdown in Auckland, and so we've got a few remaining follow-up interviews we need to do, and there's some community huis which we'll come to. So in terms of the project aims and objectives, we're trying to build theoretical insights. So often we receive crime control policies and we experience them, and so we're trying to give feedback on that process. So our communities are the communities that are impacted deeply by crime control policies. So we want to understand how different types of policies and interventions and practices actually impact on our communities, both people who live in the community, the family, the whānau, ainga, and the youth as well. So how do the youth experience it? We're also trying to think about how the people who work within our communities, within the youth space, how they experience these policies and their interactions with the state. Another main aim with our project is to build researcher capacity in this area. And so in that respect, we've got Talia on board to help us with the research, and I'll pass it across to Talia now.
Cool, and thank you. So I would firstly like to acknowledge that it was challenging to find breakdowns of youth offending data in terms of ethnicity for all three of the jurisdictions. So in Aotearoa, the category of Pacific wasn't broken down any further. In Australia, data tended to focus on Indigenous and non-Indigenous. And then in the United States, it didn't really go beyond Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander. However, there's still some important points that came up. But to give context, just under 17% of the population in Aotearoa are Māori, and 4% are Samoan, which is roughly half of the Pacific population in Aotearoa. Altogether, Māori and Pacific Islanders make up about 1% of the Australian population. And in the United States, there are approximately 200,000 people with Samoan descent, a third of which live in California. So overall, in all three of these countries, the numbers of young people interacting with the youth justice system is decreasing. However, in Aotearoa, the proportion of Māori and Pacific peoples in this group have stayed relatively stable over the past 10 years. With the reduction in offending rate also being lower for Māori and Pacifica youth compared to European. And so following on from this, 20 to 30% of young people apprehended by police go to youth court. However, the overall number of those appearing in court and being charged is decreasing. Despite this, in around 2019-2020, the number of young people charged, of those charged in court, 62% were Māori and 9% were Pacifica, which demonstrates a greater number of Māori and Pacifica youth being brought into the court system and being charged, which supports the notion that Māori and Pacifica youth face more severe outcomes. And then an interesting point which came up in the research is the crossover between youth justice and state care and protection. In Aotearoa, in the 5-year period between 2014 to 2019, 88% of young people that were referred to a youth justice family group conference had a prior concern reported by Oranga Tamariki relating to their care and protection. And likewise in Australia, between 2014 to 2018, half of the population in the youth justice system had been in previous contact with care and protection services. So overall, despite the number of young people involved in the youth justice system decreasing across all three countries, Māori and Pacifica youth seem to be overrepresented in all aspects of these youth justice systems. However, making this general comparison requires looking deeper into interactions occurring within the youth justice systems, as a picture that's solely constructed from various crime rates provided by government agencies fails to include any notion of the social and political environment in which these official statistics are a result of. And I'll pass over to Rob to discuss more on that.
There's some limitations to the data, and I guess one of the reasons why we interrogate the data itself is because it's often the official picture which is taken as the picture of crime and crime control and how our communities are organised. And so we wanted to interrogate this and think about this a bit further. And one of the purposes of this presentation is to try and, I guess, enhance the picture of the official picture and look at different ways of recording data about our communities and how they experience youth justice. Some of the official limitations are clearly outlined. So it's very hard to disaggregate Pacifica data and to get down to the smaller cultural groups within that. So it's hard to see how many Samoan youth, for example, are going through the system. And it's a preoccupation, I guess, of the state itself, the way in which the state defines categories of groups of people. Often they don't record fully to the extent that we'd like in terms of research. So one of the reasons why we're engaging in this qualitative project is to try and build up our understandings of that space. And it's often assumed that the crime rates reflect some kind of reality out there. When we talk about social construction, so the crime rates or the official figures and official statistics are a reflection of governmental recording practices. They can reflect the different ways in which crime rate or statistics are collected over time, but also the different policies that are implemented. So, for example, the New Zealand Police changed the way in which they recorded youth offending in 2018. So there's changes in the ways in which the official practices occur. It's also changes in the way in which policing operates, as an example. So that has an impact on the figures that we record. One of the big limitations of the New Zealand data is age standardisation. So it's not common to have age standardisation in the justice figures. And this is particularly pertinent to Māori and Samoan youth because it's a very young population as a whole. So if we do a comparison with Australia, age standardisation is very common practice within justice figures. So we seem to be slightly behind with that. And age standardisation occurs in health data. So Ministry of Health, for example, has been using age standardisation of the data since 2006. So there has been some indications that this is going to occur. So we were consulted in 2018 by a member of police, researcher from Police National Headquarters, who indicated that they were going to be exploring age standardisation for youth. But those figures haven't been released yet. So we're hopeful that age standardisation will help give a better picture, at least, of the official picture of youth offending. The other issue is the control statistics, and Maggie Walter, professor in Australia, talks about how statistics on Indigenous populations is often controlled by the state, and it's controlled as part of the way in which Indigenous peoples are managed in terms of policy. And she talks about a deficit focus as well. So often the stats focus on deficits within communities, and the argument is often it's used as a form of justifying intervention by the state. So the deficit focus within the figures, the descriptive figures which need to be unpacked further, I guess. And so one of the reasons for us doing the research is trying to understand the ways in which the official picture of crime is actually experienced. So moving on to our approach and our approach, so we've held community hui and whānau, so those are community meetings, and that looked at and that looked at we managed to do most of the United States, the US leg before lockdowns. So that's great. So Los Angeles, San Francisco, Bay Area. We did part of the Australian leg. So we've done Brisbane in Queensland. We've still got a community hui to go and get the Gold Coast. We've done most of the New Zealand leg in terms of Auckland, Wellington, Taranaki and Gisborne. We've still got the Christchurch leg to go. So we've got three types of talk data, and I'll pass it across to Talia.
So in terms of trying to ensure that the data sets are able to speak in culturally responsive ways, our Talanoa and kaupapa Māori methodological approaches privilege the kanohi ki te kanohi approach to carrying out conversations with our participants. So we carried out both individual and group Talanoa sessions, and as well the hui sessions. We have yet, as Rob says, to do the Talanoa sessions with our young people and families. We've got a PhD student who has started engaging with some of our families and young people as a corresponding project with this Marsden project. And so some of that has begun, but we're still in the process of collecting that data. For now, what we wanted to focus in on is some of the hui Talanoa data that we've been able to gather. So, Rob, you want to take this one?
Yeah, I guess so. We've got three preliminary themes coming from the community hui and Talanoa, and we'll start off with deficit focus. So this theme was quite an interesting one, and it was articulated in different ways. So this particular quote from a community participant, they talk about the ways in which youth or children actually take on the negative portrayals of themselves. So they're often told that they're stupid, they're told that they're criminals, And this sense of identity becomes part of something that they actually take upon. So this particular quote emphasis on kids are good at remembering the better interpretation. So kids don't understand the ways in which people in positions of power actually are discussing them. So I think another key point from this quote is when you read all the stats in Pacific and Māori world here, it's really hard to be proud. The system reinforces those things. And so we understand that there's deficit stats. We understand the way in which the state portrays our communities, and it's often taken on board by the youth. So that deficit focus actually has a negative impact. This particular set of quotes, once again from, this was a youth worker who went along to support a youth, first within in a court setting, and they're trying to talk about the strengths of the person and trying to talk about the person in terms of what they can actually do. And they're talking about the person's been an amazing artist and they can do artwork. And yet within the court, people will look at them and look at the person in terms of being a criminal. So the deficit focus has been articulated, I guess, and this is raised at different community hui, that the focus of the criminal justice system or the court process is to focus on criminality, to focus on deficits rather than focus on the strengths of the youth. So this has an impact, I think, of the way in which our communities are viewed, and also the responses by the formal state. This discussion also, another theme was on the culturally disconnected system itself. So this particular community worker talked about going into the space and talking about the way in which the communities are received within that space. The languaging of the court system or the justice system is not, it's monocultural, and I guess it doesn't really reflect our cultural understanding. So they talk about the way in which the languaging, in terms of justice, is a racist discourse. It doesn't acknowledge a Samoan tone, Samoan voice, or a Māori voice. So one of the interesting things that came from some of the community meetings was the overlap between Māori experiences and Samoan experiences within the community space. Talia, do you want to speak to this one?
Yeah, I can pick up on that one. And just to carry on the point that was made from the earlier slide about tone, often the concept of tone is found to be important to Pacific cultures because a lot of it is about not what you're saying, but how you're saying it and the way in which how you've said it has come across, and the interpretations of meaning that are taken and drawn from tone are important. And understanding that is a cultural thing that is often, if you're not from the same culture or not familiar with that culture, you will miss. And so the system in terms of the culture of the state is such that a lot of these nuances of culture are missed. So the disconnection in the cultural system, what was interesting and reflecting on the commentary by those who participated in the hui across the three countries, is that there are these similarities of experiences and articulations of culture and cultural disconnect. So in the South Queensland whānau, which was one of our Samoan, which was the Samoan whānau, the Samoan community there in Brisbane and Logan City in particular, one of the participants spoke very passionately about the purpose by which many Pacific and Polynesian or Samoans get involved in working for the state and the service that they give to the state on behalf of their people. And part of the driving force for doing that, as she says in this quote, is to assist the state in addressing the risk issues of our young people getting involved in the system and being able to develop a responsive state approaches to our young people and their families. So as you can read there, there's quite an involved or an engaged understanding of the role that Pacific Samoan Māori people in the South Queensland system have towards the work that they do in the system. And you can see with these quotes that the theme of disconnection, cultural disconnection between the culture of the state and the way in which it operates and responds to other more marginal cultures is such that it provides the perception or effect where those from minority communities like Māori and Pacific Samoan feel that the state doesn't know manaakitanga, whanaungatanga, all the tangas, wha Samoa, and so forth, so that there is a inherent disconnect between the way in which the state systems have been set up to understand relations between people. So the Aotearoa Hui participant talks about whaaloalo, the Samoan concept of whaaloalo in tautua and whinganga, and that these are concepts that are foreign, are still very much foreign to the mainstream justice system. And this is echoed in by our California participant in the California whono, who talks about the disconnect between the state and community groups like Indigenous community groups and those that service Pacific peoples, Polynesian peoples in the States, that there is a desire to be responsive, but in their responsivity, they end up hijacking the Indigenous programs in ways that better suit the state understandings rather than the other way around. I'll give you a turn, Rob.
So another theme was communities often spoke about the difference in the ways in which they responded to the community itself rather than the state processes. And they talked about being more responsive to the needs of the community. So this particular quote's from Aotearoa Hui participant working within the Māori provider space. They talk about the need to actually provide support for the community, regardless of what the contract says. So the state itself has certain limitations in budgets and different types of, I guess, aims within their policies. For Māori, we have to provide for the needs of the community, independent of what the state wants. And so the Māori providers talking in this one that even if we're not paid by the contract to do it, we see what else we can do. Often the contracts are segmented. So when we visited one of the Māori providers, they were doing justice contracts alongside health contracts, alongside food banks, alongside education. So they were doing a whole range of different contracts, but it's all segmented. So they have a wraparound approach which looks at trying to provide a lot more for the community than just a single focus, I guess, with a criminal justice system. They also have they tend to move away from, as I said previously, the deficit focus. So in this particular quote, they're talking about having an aspirational view with kids and find out what the kids actually want. So how do you support the aspirations of the young people as they go through? How do you help them achieve their aspirations? So it's a move away from just punishing people, and it's seeing how to develop, I guess, people within the community. There's also conversations about a whānau focus, which is more of a collective focus, a family focus. So it's not just about the young person, it's about the family as well. So how do you support that? So the community provider here is talking about actually providing support for the entire family. And within New Zealand, within Aotearoa, we've got a whānau ora policy, which is a government policy. there's been some questions amongst Māori, I guess, whether or not the whānau order policy actually goes far enough when it's delivered by the state. And so in some respects, this quote's talking about a Māori organisation who actually does whānau order, not just to the state policy as the state defines it, but they actually do it within a Māori space. So for Māori, whānau order is central to how the community understands, I guess, one with family health or health and well-being. It's another way of saying it. So it's central to Māori culture itself. So it's not just a state policy which can be funded or not funded depending upon what the government wants. This is something that's central to Māori culture. So the community participant in this one is reflected upon the importance of the whānau order in terms of cultural rather than just what the government policies suggest.
And the responsibility point that Rob just raised is one that this participant from Brisbane raises around why it is that Pacific Polynesian peoples get into the social and health services and justice services. And that is to the continuation in Samoan of the concept and the notion of giving service or tautua, and that the pathway to leadership is understood to be through giving that selfless service. So it's more than just getting a job and getting a pay packet. There is a sense that when you're serving your communities, where the contract obligations may end, you still continue with your cultural obligations in order to be able to fulfill that tautua perspective. So it's something that Pacific Polynesian Māori families, Samoan families, young people learn from a young age, and they take it into their work, whether it be in the NGO sector or in the government sector.
Just to summarise the presentation, we're at the end where we discuss the main theme. So this is more about trying to enhance, I guess, the official picture of crime and trying to give more meaning and understanding to the way in which crime stats, some of the experiences that are part of our community experience. So to enhance our understandings and to build upon the narrative. So we turn to the narratives of our communities to actually build up an understanding of how our communities experience state crime control policies itself. It's also acknowledged through the work that the contributions of Māori Pacific communities actually to build responses to actually respond to issues within our community, and that we're actually able to support youth development as well alongside the state, and that's quite important to acknowledge. Sailor, did you want to add anything else?
I think you've said it all, Rob, but thank you for the opportunity to be able to participate in this conference and to present some of the findings from this study. Just want to thank again our hui participants for their commitment to the project, and look forward to continuing to engage with them as we work towards finishing the project.
And if you want to find out any further information from this particular presentation, we've got an article coming out, hopefully before the end of the year, with New Zealand Sociology, and it goes in more detail if you want to find out more. I'll end the presentation there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ka kite whakatau.
He aha te mea nui o tēnei au. He tangata, he wahine pia, māku e ki atu, ngā rangatahi, ngā rangatahi, ngā rangatahi moa pōpō. What's the most possession in the world? If you would ask me, and only me, I will say it's our children, our children of tomorrow. Once they are cared for and nurtured, only then are we. Ai o ki te rangi, ai o ki te whenua, ai o ki ngā mea katoa. Tihei mauri ora. Kia ora, ko Treyci Maynard tōku ingoa. I whānau mai au I tūranga nui a kiwa, engari I piri pane I noho ana hau I nainei. My name is Treyci Maynard. I'm from Gisborne, and I hail from the staunch tribes of Rongo Whakaata, Ngai Tūhoi, Ngāti Kahunganui, and Ngā Puhi Nui Tonu. Ngā mihi. Tēnei te mihi atu nei ki tēnei papa whenua o ngā moemoe am. I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land and pay respects to their cultures, the ancestors, and to the elders past, present, and all future generations. I would also like to extend that respect to all other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in the community. I've been fortunate for many years of living abroad to be able to teach my language here, to perform and embrace my Māori culture whilst living in this diverse country. Thank you, Australia. Ko wai mātou, who are we? Ko wai mātou, enganguru nei hi o, awe ha. Ko awe tu, enganguru nei hi o, awe ha. Awe tu consists of both myself and my colleague and whanaunga, Kingston Napier, both teachers, ex-kapahaka tutors and performers. Awetu, awareness of thyself, those around you, those important to you. Your support network, awareness is happiness. Whānau, our all, extended relations, neo whā, family, group, wider network, support, and in modern terms can be used to include friends who have no kinship ties to other members. In richness, our culture is rich in itself. You have so many valuable tools to help guide us in life, which drives me to want to share, especially with our rangatahi or youth. Trusting yourself first and foremost. My colleagues and the programs that I teach, which incorporates the teachings of our cultural values, our tikanga, customs, our kawa, rituals and beliefs. Uniqueness, that's you. Everyone's different. We must respect that. Authentically unique, you are you, and there's only one you. I am I. Awetu. Diversity and inclusion in Australia. Since migrating to Australia in 2007, I felt it was always a diverse country. I formed my first cultural group at Capalaba State College, the first school I ever taught at, with the focus of just keeping our tamariki at school. Why? Well, it was a privilege for me to even teach our culture here on another land, let alone during school times. So I made practices on a Friday, last period, to keep our kids there for the whole day. This gave them something to look forward to, a reason to keep their grades up, and no reason to bunk or to wear. I always included diverse cultures. I encompassed the behaviour contract for parents to sign, and we never had issues as long as it was agreed on that practices were met, attitudes were on point, and the respect was reciprocal. This went on for the next 3 years, practicing, performing, touring the community and speaking at cultural diversity platforms here in Queensland. The kids' behaviour was improving and absences were decreasing. Fortunately for me, the next year I was made a permanent teacher, bless, and years later still, unfortunately, no priority in education for our Māori. And this just didn't sit well with me, obviously. So my dream job arose and I jumped at that. And ever since a young age, I've always had a passion for working with youth at risk. So off I went. It led me to going from teaching on the outside and then into the inside, to another world. One familiar to me, to the Education Training Centre or the Brisbane Youth Detention Centre. Te wharihiri mō ngā tamariki, au we he pauri. Or not, sad, it was. So very exciting, challenging yet rewarding. It wasn't long that the timatanga hou program was thought of, a new beginning, and there was more rangatahi who needed help. So, Te Timatanga Hou, a new beginning, ngā aporanga, the actual program. Te Timatanga Hou, a new beginning is a program created to target social and cultural interventions through evidence-based strategies with an aim to improve our youth outcomes. The program will begin the new change where our youth will discover and reconnect who they are and where they come from culturally. For a lot of our young people, they struggle with actually knowing just that, who they are and where they come from. Self-identity is the first issue which affects a person, especially when living away from home and for so long. When I left New Zealand, I swore I would never change and never lose my cultural values and ways of my upbringing, no matter what. And this has been my motivational force and my drive, which I carry with me throughout my daily teachings, knowing who I am as a person. The majority of the young people that I've come across over the years have either been born here or migrated here with their whānau or families. And I absolutely love helping them to regain their cultural identity and helping them learn about the beauty of just te ao Māori itself. So this is the basic foundation that Te Timatanga Hou serves, reconnecting one with themselves first and foremost, and their whānau, hitori or history, and their whakapapa or kinship ties. And from there, the world has become their oyster, and learning never stops. Ipu kōrero, our objectives. 1, definitely self-identity, regaining cultural identity and reconnecting with their own, with themselves. Everyone has a place in the world, and in this fact, our te ao Māori world. Whānau. For a lot of our kids or our young people, they haven't had whānau to connect to. So that's why it's important for me to help find some. Whakapapa or kinship ties, like I said before, hitori or history, waiata, learning songs, haka, maurako, that's where Kingston comes in, expert in the use of traditional Māori items or tools pertaining to each individual skill or background. Then comes the skills, providing students with an understanding of traditional Māori arts, dance and drama. Just by doing that comes teaching discipline, patience and respect. And we all know a lot of our kids don't have a lot of that. They have to be taught that. Belonging. This program gives students a sense of belonging to a community, regardless of where they reside in the world. Now, our ipu kōrero, we're safe, human whare haumaru, providing a safe place for our young people to come and feel welcome, wanted and at home at all times. A place where as a whānau or family, we set our own boundaries to what's expected for the duration of the time that we're all together. Impact. Like so many mentors or people who have made an impact on me in my life, and there have been many, I'd like to think that from my teachings, from any of the programs that we deliver, that we have an everlasting and positive effect on some of these young people that we take under our wing. And there's a beautiful proverb that I always live by. Ko te kaia te rangatira he kōrero. So what is the food of our leaders? It is knowledge. It is knowledge. It's knowledge. Respect. Everyone's treated fair and equal, and this must be reciprocal. Listening to each other, especially when one's talking, is key. For some, this can be a very hard task. Engagement. Now, I'm an audio and kinesthetic person, so I've designed programs in ways where it's just exactly that, hands-on and fun, and where it's not boring and people want to go home. Culturally sensitive. Now, to all cultures too. Now, because they're so culturally diverse and inclusive for all, basically do your research and watch what you say and to who. I mean, there have been many of times where I've had to correct people who commonly say Samoan and Māori are the same, eh? Hey, and I'm like, no, we're not, love. Well, how then? Well, you want a fist? Or because I don't wear jandals to give you a whack. So, you know, yeah, have a laugh, but it's not really funny in the end. And commonly that happens over here in Australia. Some of the particulars or part of our program include some of these things here: term focus for schools, holiday focus for YJ or centre programs, students and staff, feedback forms. Feedback is so important because you can't move on or better programs if you don't give feedback. Programs all culturally diverse, never gonna leave anyone out as long as they respect the content of the course. Resources supply, implementation plans, therapeutic practices, definitely within our Māori, Māoridom. Students will showcase their success, and I've had plenty of success stories where our students have had little to none knowledge of their Māori background. Next minute, they have hopped on stage and showcased their talents that they've learned by way of performing. Completion certificate and a program shoot at the end. Opportunity to dress in traditional attire, where a lot of our students know absolutely nothing about what our culture used to wear. And we as colleagues complete weekly evaluation forms so that we're able to enhance our performance delivery. I think as a teacher, that's something that I'm really fond of doing. Mātauranga and learnings. So here, I've just basically put some of the things that our kids enhance on their learning. Again, I've mentioned history, drama, acting, and way of being able to act, waiata, singing, learning, whānau, getting some of their whānau involved, performing live. Some kids don't like to be put on the spot, but then again, when you can perform, it's a different story. The arts, as you can see, this beautiful artwork in the background is portrayed in another way. Kapahaka, the point, iwi, getting our iwi involved from back home. There's been plenty of times when I've had to bring up to whānau and friends and iwi back home to ask for assistance or help or tautoko, and I've always had that support. Kura, hapu, same thing, iwi and hapu, support. Haka, teaching our kids about the haka and whakawhanaungatanga or whanaungatanga, togetherness. Karakia, learning and teaching our young people about karakia. And maurako, expert. So the arts, those are just some of our things. So for your information, there's no current or recent photographs or video footage which have been used just out of respect of any of our young people. However, all work is kept, all work is filed, and performances are recorded. As mentioned previously, Te Timatanga Hau promotes teaching the taonga or treasures passed on from our ancestors, that of everything that I've just explained here. In terms of behaviour improvements, the list is paramount. And just to name a few, I've acquired leaders within just themselves, reconnecting with their own self. And I aim to improve behaviour overall, decreasing detention re-entry rates, expanding cultural awareness is key, break down language barriers, increasing attendance at school, joining a culture group, reconnecting with whānau and or community, establishing positive relationships with others, uplifting their own self-esteem and self-confidence, being able to speak and learn their language and learn traditional Māori practices like their karakia, and also tikanga and kawa. What's missing? Ngā mea kua ngaro. There's a gap. There's a noticeable gap. Whānau in the system for our Māori culture And if you haven't realised this by now, do the math. In 2016, the ABS data show there are 201,206 Kiwis living just here in Queensland. Now, how many of those do you think are Māori? And that number does not include all Kiwis living in Australia, nor does it account for the latest stats due to come out by June 2022. Let me just say that again, 201,206 Kiwis just in Queensland, not including Māori. Te mana, kua ngaro, lost cultural identity. We can definitely improve this if we made our culture a priority. Now, mana tangata, self-identity. These young people over here are so lost, and I can't culturally reach out to them all, but I'll never stop doing what I'm trying to achieve. I'm trying to deliver as fast as I can to whoever requires me as far as my own funding can allow. Meanwhile, the population of Māori Pacific Islanders continues to grow by year, by year, by year. So now what? And where to from here moving forward? Mana motuhake, cultural community. This is what our kids lack over here, especially those in detention. Like previously mentioned again and again, we are the community. They can be saved. Our culture is and will forever be strong here, but we are not, and I'll say it again, not a priority in government funding and policies. Help. Awhi my hopes, my aspirations for our rangatahi, my desires are hopefully, and I'm just going to look at my beautiful screen here because this is my favourite one, te haumaru, to provide a safe space. And this is my whānau marae, because every time that I run a program of te timatanga hau, we have either a classroom, music room, whatever space that I'm provided with, we have te whare haumaru where we have a safe place. This is my safe place when I go home. One of my marae, this is my marae whakatō. I would love, and one of my desires is to establish a Māori youth service or provider for our rangatahi here in Brisbane South East Queensland. A place to continue to nurture their cultural or self-identity. That's that. I would like to continue to organise and run the rangatahi support programs. Te timatanga hau provides and establish more for schools, education providers and detention centres around Australia. I would like to promote Māori culture awareness and programs throughout education service providers aiming to improve relationships and reconnecting youth back to the communities. Secure funding for all of the above. Full support of whānau in New Zealand and Australia, and continue to teach te reo, our language, me ona tikanga, our values, kapahake i ngā wā katoa, our traditional Māori performing arts, dance and drama, all the time. Finally, e hara taku tō i te tuataki tahi, engari, he tuataki mano. My success is the result of a collective effort. There's only one you, I am I, and you are you. And because there's no platform for questions and answers just yet, whānau, I thought I'd leave you with this last slide of just a bit of memory lane. So at the back, you see I've used the art piece throughout 3 slides. That's actually an art piece that our kids at the Youth Detention Centre painted. It's a huge mural. And I'm fortunate enough that when my brother came over here to visit me for another reason, he came in here and I ended up taking, making him come in to take some of our boys for an art class, and that's what they produce, and all talking about reconnecting them back to their own culture, New Zealand. Up on the top left there, we actually, from when I piloted my first program of Te Timatanga Hau at BYDC in 2018, was a 6-week program. At the end, the assessment was to produce a hāngi, a steamed hāngi on the bottom right here, with my whānau coming in to help with that. And the the kids actually had to get up, they had to peel, pack, cook, and then serve 250 hāngi centre wide. Something that I'm very, very grateful for doing that. At the top here, we have my first school at Kapalapa State College, my first culture group, and that was one of the Anzac parades that we did on in the school. And next door, and I had permission to use this photo, was one of my year 12 boys that graduated at his formal, and his mother took that photo. And that boy is actually from where I'm from, back home in Gisborne. And down below is Kingston and I, when we had the opportunity to perform 6 shows at the Gold Coast Commonwealth Games in 2018. So just a little snippet of some of our youth success and what we can offer to our kids. So, yeah. Anyway, whānau, ngā mihi anō kia koutou katoa ko huhu mai nei I tēnei rā, ngā mihi ki tēnei papa whenua o ngā moemoeā, and to all the rest of the speakers who are speaking in our diversity and inclusion platform, I would like to mihi to you all and thank you for the opportunity to Australian Youth Justice. Ngā mihi. Kia ora.